strange how it happens. Maybe it's, spring is in the air or something like that. I don't know.
So welcome everybody to tonight's live stream. Without further ado, we will go straight to Paul and his guest.
Thank you very much, Les. And week's soon come around again, hasn't it? And we're thrilled tonight to be speaking to Dr. Jim Segala. And this bio, I'm not going to read it all, people, and I'm sure Jim will smile because it does go on, and it's a credit to him. But there's over 30 years in the field of scientific and engineering, designing experimental systems. Dr. Segala holds a PhD in physics as well as advanced degrees in engineering. As like I said, I could go on, and no doubt it might enlighten us all a little bit further and tell us in a bit more detail than what I'm doing now. But Jim, welcome to Truth Proof.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
No, you're welcome. And, you know, I know that I am, and I know that our listeners are kind of really thrilled to hear what you've got to tell us. Having somebody from academia, somebody with a proven scientific record, looking into the subject of unexplained phenomena. It's not rare by today's standards, I suppose, but you've stepped away from the path of most scientists, I would have thought. And yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Jim.
Well, yeah, I started as an engineer back, when I started my career, and slowly went forward and, wanted to get into the area of the unknown and starting to understand some of the things that people were scratching their head about, and fell into this particular subject of trying to understand, why people are getting hurt, how are these strange phenomena happening, and why people are interacting with this, and just got more and more interested, and the opportunities presented themselves, and I just over the years just slowly moved into this, and now it seems like it envelops my whole day.
Yeah, so it was a gradual shift. There wasn't one episode or thing that someone spoke about that made you think, I need to get involved, this needs some serious study.
Well, I always had the advantage of working for some very interesting people that had very high visibility into some of the strange phenomena that was going on. To give you a little more information about myself, I worked for a gentleman by the name of Dr. Hal Puthoff, who ran a very successful institute out of Austin, Texas. And Hal Puthoff was Bob Bigelow, who was Bob Bigelow Aerospace, who bought Skinwalker Ranch and everything like that. Hal Puthoff was Bob Bigelow's chief scientist, and he advised Bob Bigelow over many years. I working for Hal, I got involved with a lot of the strange things that Bob was uncovering, and some of the other things that were being uncovered throughout the time that Hal had his institute, and I worked for him. So, and I have a medical background. I have a medical physics background, and my PhD had a lot to do with how energy interacts with the human physiology. So, I aspired to some of these conditions that these people were realizing, and I started answering questions that nobody else was able to answer, and they slowly moved me in and put me right in the mix of it.
Yeah. So this was probably a question that I would have asked later, but you mentioned Bigelow, and how much of the former research at, say, Skinwalker have you been able to see, and is it limited?
No, it was actually interesting. So Bob Bigelow spent maybe 15 or 20 years in total owning the ranch. He actually funded a large group of scientists that went on there, boots on the ground, doing experiments, bringing lots of data. I came on a little bit after they were finished with their 6 or 7 years of investigation. Now I had all this data. One of my specialties is analyzing data. So I was fortunate enough to be able to look at a lot of the data that came back from the ranch, his first year, like in 2010-ish, and finding first of all that there was some strange electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational anomalies, trying to map those and trying to do some temporal type of analysis to see how it flowed over time and things like that. So, I got into it early and actually looked at the actual data coming from that time span that Bigelow had his scientists on the ranch.
Excellent. So, but the study that you set up was the Uinta Basin Anomalous Phenomena Study. I hope I've got that right.
Yep.
And so when did you begin that? Late 2019, was it?
Yeah, so I had gotten involved with that area. I really didn't even know that area existed, physically until maybe 2012, 2013. And then I was asked to join a team of myself, a medical doctor, some other scientists, to go investigate one of the injuries that happened that were pretty pronounced. I mean, to the point where the gentleman almost died. And it was some very strange things. The attendees had no idea what this particular injury came from. So I was one of the people that started investigating it. During that investigation, I met a lot of people that had very similar things happen to them in the basin. Uinta Basin, which is a area of Utah, which is just below the Uinta Canyon, and probably one of the more active areas in the country. There's other active areas, but that's one of the more active countries. Of course, now you have, I don't know if you're familiar with Blind Frog Ranch. That's another area that you have a lot of activity. I have a really good relationship with the gentleman that owns the property. I had a good relationship with the gentleman that now owns the Skinwalker area, or property. So now I have the ability to go and do lots of research in the area. So
How close proximity is Blind Frog to the Skinwalker Ranch?
about, I would say about, depending on how you look at the landfall, it's about maybe 15 to 20 miles away. I mean, it's close enough, so it's what they call it's somewhat on the ley lines. It's the way the energy flows through that whole area. It's speculated that there's ley lines there. So
Yep.
it says that it starts up on the canyon, goes down through Blind Frog Ranch, and disperses out. And Skinwalker Ranch is somewhat close to that whole flow.
Okay. So when you talk about the study, how
Yes.
many people are taking part in the experiment or the study?
So this started out with a very few people back in 2018, I believe, or 2009, maybe early 2019. It was just one or two people had expressed interest in trying to, or actually, I expressed interest in them because I wanted to understand why they were getting hurt, why they ended up in the hospital, what were the injuries about, and I built some devices which they would either carry with them or leave in their house. That what I was trying to do was correlate what would happen to them physically to what is happening in the environment. So in other words, if somebody was having an experience, they were, having tremendous headaches, or they would have nosebleeds or earaches or something like that. I wanted to correlate that with some changes in maybe the electromagnetic spectrum or the gravitational field. So I put these devices in their general vicinity, and those devices recorded information about them very continuously. And it just that I started to correlate things that were happening to them to actual changes in the environmental signals. And that was very interesting. Now, anytime a scientist says, okay, well, I can actually put two pieces of data together, that's the big thing. So then more people, I noticed that there was more people that had this very similar things. So now we're up in the mid 30s as far as the number of people that actually have in the study, have devices, and are participating.
How do you separate? And I know it must be difficult, but how do you separate natural illness? I mean,
Well, we have medical records on everybody.
yeah,
Everybody that joins the study, we have medical professional that actually goes through their files and their records and things like that to see whether or not it's an autoimmune, or it's a bacterial, or something, or it's a neurological, something that happened to them in the past. Only people that really have that big question mark and say, we don't know what's going on with you. The
yeah.
attending physicians say, we just don't have any idea. So one of the people that they got admitted, it was very strange. They came in perfectly healthy one day. The next day they came into the hospital with complete loss of speech, the diagnosed with early signs of Parkinson's, which is not a kind of disease that has a very acute onset, right? It takes a long time to develop. And within a month after that, they were completely cured. So whatever happened to them was not something that medically they had a good answer for. So this particular person, actually, there's a whole story about this particular person, but a lot of, they happened to be walking out of a building. They looked up, they saw something in the sky, and immediately, they had this very sharp pain in the back of their head. They lost their ability to speech. They went right to the hospital, diagnosed with Parkinson, And it took them over a month to get back to the point where they can, be normal again.
And do they have a past history of interaction with the phenomena?
No,
Oh,
actually, most of these people will swear up and down they didn't even believe that stuff. But
no.
now, of course, they can't, dispute it. It's like, all of a sudden, they're in the mix of this thing, and now they say, yeah, I think it's time to say I believe this.
Yeah. Were there any particular case that made you sort of, I'd say jump off the fence, but just jump in full weight and study it? Or I know you said it was a gradual process, but there must have been a turning point.
There was a gentleman that I think most people know who he is. He was involved with Skinwalker and one of the people that were actually on the show that I was on. That particular case was the one that brought me into the mix, and that was the one that this person had gone for a week with very very strange things happening to him. He was hearing voices. He was very, personality had changed. He was receiving instructions from something that was in his head, and then all of a sudden his head started to, or the back of his head started to inflame, and there was a big big bump in the back of his head. Went to the hospital with incredible pain, and the doctor said, we just have no idea what's going on with you. And there was a whole study that we did on this person. This whatever happened to them looked to everybody to be something that only would happen in an extreme car accident or something like that. But you know nothing like that ever happened. So we came in and we looked at this, and with my colleagues, I had medical professionals with me, and we came to the conclusion that the only way that we can explain what happened to this particular gentleman in this case was some type of energy beam, some electromagnetic energy, or some high level electromagnetic, or even going up to the gamma range, which is
Yeah.
kind of scary to begin with. That was the only thing that really fit all the symptoms. And we took months to do this, and we, you know, scratched our head for months trying to figure out what was going on with this until we finally got to the point where we said, okay, if you take all the symptoms, all the medical reports, and lay them all out, the only thing that really fit was this energy beam.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I says, I can't explain where this stuff comes from. So,
No.
and I say, this is not the only person that can possibly, this is not an anomaly. This has to happen over and over again. So that's what sparked my interest.
Fabulous. But I'm hoping you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about some of the trauma that people have suffered, not to sound too macabre. But before we do that, can you go into a little bit more detail about the machine or the equipment that the people that the study cases are using?
Yeah. So I had given you PowerPoint. If you go to, I think, page 11 of that PowerPoint, maybe bring that up.
Okay.
Again, what are the interesting things about this? Over the years now, I've been doing this now since maybe 2019. This equipment has evolved. What you do is in a scientific manner is that you first come out with something that's maybe rudimentary, devices that are rudimentary that you really don't know what you're going to read, but you kind of leave it wide open. And when you first have these devices, you start learning things, and then as you progress, you get more and more, and the devices actually evolve and become more accurate. So now we're at the point where we know basically what we're reading. All the sensors that are within this equipment are of a certain caliber that can read the kind of sensations that people are experiencing.
And
So
is it something they carry with them? I can't see the image that's up there on the screen. So
okay, yeah. So there's three images. There's three actual devices. One of the images is one that they put in their pockets. It's
right.
doesn't have a tremendous amount of data coming from it, but it has sufficient amount. It could read low-level gamma. It could read electromagnetic anomalies. It could read, some of the gravitational stuff, but not to an extreme degree. But the people carry it around with them, and I get some good data from those. The one in the middle there is something that they put in their houses. This is also actually is a twofold thing. You could put this one deep into the ground, and you also I stand it up to let people put it in their houses. This is the one that I have predominantly out there in the Uinta Basin, which has lots of data. I get lots of gamma rays and microwaves. I get a lot of gravity vector and all the acceleration vectors and environmental factors. and I'm getting those things like every millisecond. I get all new data. And what the beauty of this device is that it comes along with I have a whole infrastructure around it where the people can go to a website and they or onto their phones and they can actually log what's going on with them on a daily basis or an hourly basis. They could say, look, I woke up today with a tremendous headache. Today was, I felt there was somebody watching me, or I felt that somebody was following me. And then what I do is I take those anecdotal comments that they make throughout the day and I put them in, I timestamp them, put them in a database, and then I go back to the data itself and I line that up and I correlate it with actual stuff that's going on inside the sensors. And then a lot of, not all the time, and I want to give everybody the idea that, all these, it happens every time, but it happens enough that we say, look, they would say, look, they would wake up at say at 2 o'clock in the morning. They say, I've had a terrible night. I dreamed like I was, being brought out of my body, which is very rare for these people to say. But at the same time, I look at the data and, you get some tremendous like gamma ray spikes at that exact moment, which is, of course, you can't possibly make this stuff happen yourself. These people can't go to a Home Depot and, 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 make, buy a device to do this.
So who else within the field of scientific research is doing this particular study or anything similar?
Yeah, I do look around. I go to conferences a lot and I read a lot of the periodicals and things like that. I don't see a tremendous amount of people doing this. I mean, I know there are organizations that maybe have like trifield meters or they do rudimentary type of readings, things like that. But I don't know of anybody that has a system. And I think one of the advantages that I've created here is that I have an outlet for people to log their anecdotal experiences during the day, and then I can go back and look at the data and correlate that. Now, one of the important distinctions is that I don't let the people look at the data. Some people do. I think there's maybe one or two participants that actually can see it, but most of them don't know what's going on in the sensors.
Yeah.
So I let them know like maybe a month down the road, but on a day-to-day basis, they really don't know what's going on. So it doesn't affect them. They don't know that they're getting this gamma ray spike. If they did, they might get scared.
And after a while, I would probably think that it's just become common practice, and they kind of forget about that they're involved in an experiment.
And that's the idea, and that's the whole idea. I want them to live their normal lives because what Bigelow found out, and what everybody finds out, if you try to incent this phenomenon, if you try to induce anything, doesn't do it.
Closes down.
Closes down. And you can say, well, how do you know that? So I know that because I have terabytes of data. I mean, 3 years of data coming from these things. So, and you look at it and you say, well, these people are, trying to perform, and there's some people that try to perform experiments at home. And when they do that, the thing just shuts down. It just like, it's like, you can see the waves are just so small and they don't do anything. But
isn't that the case though with the unexplained phenomena across the board? Even things on a far simpler scale, when you heard so many witnesses say when they'd seen this object in the sky, I lifted the camera up and it either switched off or it just disappeared because it's not just one step ahead, it's just ahead, isn't it? It's just that far in front of us. And do you want to talk about some of the trauma that people have suffered? Or
sure, I think that's most important. Of course, it's a varying levels. I mean, not every single buddy and not every single participant ends up in the hospital. I hope nobody gets scared. No. Oh my God. But a lot of them start this whole process by having something significant happen to them. So they'll go and, they'll be going either a normal day and something will happen. They'll have symptoms that are just out of the norm, and they'll end up in the hospital or to the doctors, and the doctors will just say, I don't really know what's going on. So you'll have people that have these incredible earaches, or they will get these, big lesions on their bodies, which the only reason you would get these particular types of lesions if you're in a radiation field. Right? Where the hell would you get a radiation field from in the middle of Utah, right? But you never know. I mean, there could be some phenomena, or there could be some entity that's using that for some probe. You don't know that. So anyway, so they would end up at the hospital. They would have these physical lesions on their body. They would have, some kind of osteoporosis or some something that would happen to their body that really the doctors would say, look, it just doesn't make any sense. Or and then sometimes people would get catatonic, and I've had that happen where people will wake up and say, look, I don't remember what happened in the past 4 hours, and they'll actually log that into their anecdotal messages to me, and I'll look at that and I'll look at their things, and all of a sudden you have this incredible microwave activity at that exact moment. Now that's actually quite interesting because that happens to livestock too. Of course, they can't tell you it's happening, but we've had experiences where we've had livestock actually go in and pass away basically because something happened to them. They would have a stressor, and every time you have a stressor, your immune system just goes crazy. And of course, when your immune system gets compromised, all sorts of crazy things happen. You get pneumonia, or a lot of bad things can happen to you. So we had I had an interesting conversation with a veterinarian about this type of thing. He says, electromagnetic strange or changes in the electromagnetic spectrum could really mess up a cow because I don't know why. I have no, I can't, but they seem to require that for their daily lives or something like that. And when they get hit by something, that it really does some damage to them or something like that.
Damages them.
Yeah.
I know you probably tell us a few more instances of people who've suffered trauma, but when does the anecdotal evidence, if that's the word, but when does it become actual evidence for you, for Jim? Because I think in the field of unexplained phenomena, most of the time, me personally, all I'm dealing with when I'm collecting these accounts and these experiences of people is anecdotal evidence. I haven't got a structured craft I can show anybody. I haven't got a cryptid I can show anybody. But when you've got people en masse, and it literally is en masse coming forward, all singing from the same hymn sheet, all unrelated to one another, in most instances, should we say, and they're saying similar things, when do we start and take anecdotal evidence as real, genuine, bona fide evidence?
Well, that's actually the whole purpose of the study, is to marry the two together. So we're taking actual scientific readings that are coming from an instrument, and we're correlating those in time with things that are happening to people. And then what's going on now is that I have enough of this data. So I've got hundreds and hundreds of these anecdotal situations that happen to people, but I have all this data that happened. So I'm getting this correlation now. I can correlate what's happening to them. They'll say, I woke up this morning and I had, this headache or whatever, whatever happened to them. And I go back and I look at their data and I say, well, just before that, you had this high increase of, I had a high increase of microwaves, say like 18 hours before, just to give an example. So I say, okay, that's interesting. That happens enough. Now that becomes a very interesting way to look at it. So now I look for that particular case in the electromagnetic spectrum that happened prior to their situation, and I wait to see if I get another hit from, if they comment and they say, look, I had another bad night. So now what's happening is that I have enough data to say, okay, every time that I see this particular, like this rush of gamma that comes in at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then just 18 hours after that, these people start complaining that they have a nosebleed. And if I have that enough, then I say, well, that's a legitimate, it's no longer anecdotal. Now that becomes a scientific data point.
Do you, and the equipment, do you sometimes get not just one or two individuals? Do you get like the eureka moment where you've got a group of individuals spread out who are having a similar hit of the gamma?
That's a great question, because not until maybe about a year ago when I had enough density of devices that are in the basin. So now like in the basin, I think we have like 27 or something like that. And what you see is that some are, and they're all up in the higher Uinta Basin area, so up near the canyon and things like that. So, maybe the closest ones are maybe 10 miles apart. What happens now is that we'll see a propagation of these signals that start in one area of the basin and propagate over to another. So I'll see a gamma hit at, 8 o'clock in the afternoon or 8 o'clock in the evening on this particular device. Maybe a few seconds later, I'll see a very similar, not exactly the same, but very similar looking shape to it in another device that's a little bit more downstream towards, say, going south, and then another one would hit going south just after that, maybe 15 miles. So that's what, that had made a reference to ley lines. Some people think ley lines are, made up things, but I look at this data and you can almost see the signal propagating all throughout these devices. Now, I don't have a tremendous amount of density. We're hoping to get a lot better, but it hopefully in the future we'll have the ability and to have enough devices out there so we can kind of map this whole thing, and maybe this whole idea of ley lines is actually real. Who knows?
How many people, Jim, are helping you with this? I don't mean the participants. The study actually correlating information. And
there's two of us. So I was fortunate enough to hook up with this Native American woman who knows just about everybody in Utah. And she's the one that actually gets all the people. She interviews them, shows them how to use the device, shows them how to, enter all the anecdotal data and things like that. So, and a lot of the people in that particular area are I would say half are Native American, because it seems that for some reason that particular group of people are the most sensitive to this phenomena and have the biggest reaction. So when we look at the data from these people, it's just amazing what they do. And of course, you can say, well, that they're, it could be made up, but you can't make up the scientific readings that we're getting. So that's the key to our success, is that we're getting the anecdotal things from them. They're very sensitive people because they have all of these religions. They're very deep believers.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff happens to them, and I can have equipment that actually has changes in readings at times that correlate to this. Not to say that everybody else doesn't have that. It's just that they're very, very sensitive.
A guy, an American, wanted to do a similar thing with me up at Bempton. Really nice guy. I met up with him, and he wanted to put some random number generators up there.
Yep.
And it was kind of a goer for me, but I could only find a few locations that would house these things. And I think you might realize difficulty that I'm facing. I mean, sounds like you've got a person placed on the ground who's got good connections to put you with these people. But it's quite sparse where we are in this particular, we'll call it the concentrated area, with probably 6 or 7 farms, and they're not thriving businesses who employ 20 or 30 people. But then the experiment, when I found out in full about it, expanded, and we'd got about, I can't remember, and if the guy's listening, and I mean it with full respect, but we'd got about 6 or 7 different pieces of equipment. And I'd have been responsible for gathering information, getting it to him, and I'd have found that I couldn't actually do what I wanted to do. I needed other people to help me with it, basically. So I can imagine that you couldn't actually go and do anything else by what you're doing. It's a full-time task, this, I would imagine, is it?
I've automated a lot of it. I mean, I have a lot of, that's kind of what I do for a living, outside of this, is I do those kind of things. So I had the advantage of being able to do the automation and get everything so it's automatically done. But the analysis of the data comes down to, me sitting there running through the models. I have, a lot of software that's been written to analyze this, weed through all the noise and all that kind of stuff. But it's great to, to be able to get this data and have these people just constantly be giving me their everyday experiences.
How many more people are coming forward? Is it all the time, or is it just word of mouth? And
well, as this gets more out there, like what I'm talking now, I mean, from here I'll get people that call and say, look, I want to participate. We handpick right now. We're not, this is not something that we're doing as a business. I mean, this is something that we're doing for a scientific endeavor, where our goal basically is to publish a scientific journal, a paper, come out with something that says, we found this information out, or maybe a book or something like that.
Yeah. But, so in the future, do you have plans to to write a book about these experiences?
So we have an ongoing book right now, and what we've asked is the people that are participants in this study to have a chapter. Some of not all of them, obviously. Some of the people to have a chapter and write their experiences within that chapter, and then what I do and my partner would do is come in and then we would sprinkle in some scientific knowledge to let people understand that these things are not what they claim is not too crazy. I mean, it's a lot of the things that there's some physiological change that happen to them is a good could be responsible for this.
Yeah. And you talked about radiation and various injuries that people have presented. Have they been tested for radiation when they've gone to hospital?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of the times people will go there with like some lesions or something like that. Well, so I've had situations where people would go up into the valley, up into Uinta Canyon, the area. I'm not the valley, the Uinta Canyon area. Go hiking, and they would come back with some lesions on their body. They would go to the doctor and say, "Look, I don't know what you did or how you got this, but this is indicative of maybe a radiation burn or something like that."
Mm.
This wasn't a chemical. It didn't have any signature like that. So, you know, you go back the next day and you go back with maybe a Geiger counter. Of course there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But the people are we are our bodies are probably the best scientific instruments there are. The
Yeah.
problem is our brain tries to rationalize everything. So our bodies are great receptors, but our brain are terrible interpreters because our imaginations go wild and
Yeah.
do all.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's why these scientific instruments are great to have.
And the lesions, Jim, are they kind of cauterized?
No,
Or
they're typical lesions you would get from a very small radiation dose, like if you've had like electron therapy on your skin for some skin cancer or something like that.
okay.
They're really not, but you're very prevalent. I mean, you can tell what they are. It's the one that it almost looks like poison ivy, but really it's not. It doesn't have those white bumps on it.
So when they're in these locations, do they come back with the lesions, or do they report having some kind of interaction with something?
Well, that's interesting. So a lot of the times people will come back from a hike and they have nothing happen to them. Everything is great and everything is great, and I won't get anything on their instruments. But a few times, what will happen is that they'll come back with something, and then they'll admit that they found this interesting looking crystal and they brought it back. A lot of the times, what they're doing is they're actually interacting with the property as opposed to just viewing the property and just kind of being part of it. They'll actually pull something or they'll break a rock off or something like that. And then the instruments will go crazy. They'll have these problems. They'll have these nightmares. They'll have everything. And then one of the interesting things is that when they bring this back to the city, they bring it back, and things level out. I mean, and you could say, well, that's crazy. Like, how can that possibly be? And if it happened once or twice, I'd say, yeah, you're right. That's not, but it happens a lot. It
Yeah.
happens enough that you say, well, there's got to be a data point here somewhere. And
Do people camp out there, or is it just a place to go hiking? And
no, a lot of people camp. Again, what we found is that so you can look at this phenomena as being something that is, a lot of people, a lot of the TV shows that are central around that area make it seem like this sinister thing, but there's a lot of people that actually enjoy it. They seem to have this euphoric feeling when they go up there, like the cricket sound goes away and things get quiet and they become very, but you have to be very respectful of this
yeah.
whole whatever this is. So if you like dig and you bring something back or you chip a rock off, probably you're gonna have an interaction. You might not have a bad one, but you might have an interaction.
So basically, then it's the mindset of the individual or the intent of the individual that determines the outcome of the interaction. Do you think?
I think so. I mean, that happens with experiments, right? So Bob
Mm.
Bigelow found that out and very frustrated him. When he set his scientists out to do an experiment, of course, it's like a quantum experiment. I mean, their involvement in the experiment actually interrupted or disturbed the experiment. What he would find out is that they would spend lots of money and spend a lot of time preparing. They would start to do the experiment, and nothing would happen. But 100 feet over there, in the another part of the thing, something would happen. I mean, something crazy would happen. So
Yeah.
it's. I mean, how do you explain something like that to a rational person?
It's impossible to explain. There's been many times over years that, well, I'll use Bempton as an example because that particular area is the only place that I've got examples of, East and North Yorkshire. But I can go up there with a good friend of mine, Bob Brown, and we can go visit 4 or 5 times a week throughout the year. Next to nothing happens. We can take an individual up there who's never been up before, pretty open-minded, but not blown away and thinks every satellite passing in skies, some distant spaceship visiting us, and they get an experience. Mm-hmm. Something happens. And I took an individual up there, Lee Hayward, and we went up. I happen to know date because I've just been doing something with Les about it, but it was November the 14th, 2019. And it was quite skeptical, but in a good way. No disrespect to what we were looking into. And immediately driving up the lane, dropping this pen, sorry. Immediately driving up the lane, Lee would be talked about it, and Lee said to me, "Well, so what do these lights look like then, Paul?" Because I've termed them intelligent light forms, these spheres of light that just appear from nowhere. They're not flying; they're just appearing, and then another one will appear, and there'll be 2, 3, 5, switch off, and a different. And as I'm driving up the lane, I literally looked out the window. There's one there. I said, like that. And he admitted afterwards, he said, as soon as I saw it, I realized I don't really know what this is, because he'd done his homework. He knew what military aircraft were going to be in the sky, civilian, the boats out at sea, because we're very close to the North Sea. And over a period of time, that particular evening, we saw the light forms about 3 or 4 times in various positions over the sea. And then I turned round and there's a huge one, 80 to 100 yards away. I've never seen anything like it whilst being up there before or since, and it's huge. He said the influence the light was giving was about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and he's right. And it was not in the sky; it was just above the field, literally feet. And as I've getting a camera around to try and put it on it, this thing's imploding and it's gone. But I've been up there since 2019 with Bob, as I've said, and we've seen nothing like that. And do you think the phenomena's playing with us? Why do you think that it's presenting to new people or different things like that are happening?
That's a really good question, and that's one of the big question marks that I have, and which inspired this study. Can we understand why it does the thing it does? Why can't we go out and have this most perfect experiment all designed because yesterday we saw something happen here. Now we have all this equipment brought to this spot. Nothing happened, but it happened over there. So it's, how do you design experiments around that? I had made an argument a while back that, that whole Uinta Basin is the perfect laboratory because it's a concentration of things happening, but it's so big. Where do you put your instruments in order to do it? So that's why you have to have instruments going continuously, and you have to have people doing their normal everyday thing, just interacting with their normal self.
You hit on that earlier, and I said it, and I've just realized now what I were meaning and what you mean right now. People have almost got to switch off from knowing they're in the experiment for the phenomena to interact, because the moment you engage, and this is I spoke to Les about it the other day, and I wrote about it in the first book. I call it the intermind connection. And because the moment you engage, the phenomena knows, doesn't it? The typical example, a rock angler on the cliff tops back then, 2014, I think it was. I might have got my date wrong there. And early evening, crisp winter's night, and he's looking up at the sky, lovely stars everywhere, but he sees a star that he doesn't recognize. And that's what he thought it was. But as soon as he'd fixed on it, he said the star, which it couldn't have been a star, was over the top of him. Lit the ground up like a welder's torch. He says the grass looked silver. He said, and then it had gone. And he believes he'd connected with this light, you know, and I suppose that's the only way, like you've just said, with your participants, they've got to almost disengage with the fact that they're in the experiment, and then is the phenomena so silly then, should we say, that's not, if that's not too silly a word, to actually realize that's what's happening?
You know, and to be honest with you, it's so every once in a while, what I'll do is I'll kind of step back and kind of look at the big picture and try to understand what it is. But on a day to day, I don't really think about that. I think more, you know, how can I design an experiment and get data so those questions will automatically be answered? That's kind of where I'm going with this. Because if you start thinking about it, then it's like, you know, I can't explain it rationally.
No.
And I
So
spent all these years in engineering school, and engineers are taught to be the most rational people there are. So it's like, I don't think that way.
no. So what? And I don't expect you to have answer to this, but what is the phenomena? What is it? Is it one hive mind then? That's what I'm meaning. That's all things, or are we dealing with a multitude of phenomena that are in an area of land that's enabling them to present?
Well, it goes back to the area that this. I mean, it looks like a lot of this stuff is concentrated in particular areas, right? So, what is the reason for that? Is there why Uinta Basin? If you ever went there, it's the desert. It's horrible. No, I shouldn't say that because people actually live there, but it's a really nice place. But
It's
if you
pretty
don't,
in a what's the word? It's not very habitable, is it?
you can't grow anything in the outside of these big cities. You can't grow anything. You can't grow grass, so you really can't have a lot of cows there. So what induces people to want to settle there, like the Aztecs, I guess, settled there, and a lot of these older populations settled there. So there has to be something there that inspired people to come and settle there. Or maybe there's this euphoric feeling in the property itself, some energy that's there. So when you ask me what is this phenomenon, I think it's probably some energy that it emanates from the ground, or it's something in the ground or something placed in the ground that the Aztecs or whoever went there, just felt good about being there. They felt protected. Why would people bury gold there or bury their precious things there? Maybe they just feel good about being in that area.
So are we talking then an intelligent energy? Because there's definitely an intelligence to whatever
Goes on and off. I mean, anything that goes on and off is not really something a nature can do. So
no.
yeah, absolutely, whatever it is. I mean, if some old civilization, from long ago that's not of this earth, buried something in there, maybe something that they can communicate with to see what's going on in this, cute little planet that they investigated once. That could be all it is. It's just we're just in the beam. Um,
Do you know, Jim? Here in the UK, a lot of the phenomena centres around burial mounds and ancient earthworks. And
yes.
you're talking about the Aztecs and burying gold. Do you think that? Well, obviously they did know the significance of the land, didn't they? You know what I mean? But do you think the phenomena were there long before?
Long time ago.
Yeah,
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that whatever is there has been there well before
yeah.
we even stepped out of the water a long time ago. I don't, and that's probably why it's so difficult for us to rationalize that and understand that. I mean, for a lot of people, maybe, from maybe in 1,000 years from now, this is going to be, oh yeah, let's go over there and, talk to those guys.
Yeah.
But right
Yeah.
now, our brains can't wrap our head around this. So
No, too right. Yeah, well, mine can't. I'll go to Les, Jim, and see if he's got any questions from the chat. And anybody in the chat, please. You already know the score in capital letters, please, and let's fire some questions at Jim.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Great show so far, and we've got some great questions in as well. So I've got to welcome Jason Davis, who wrote this question. He says, "Hi guys, has Dr. Segala had any personal experience with the hitchhiker phenomena that's reported at Skinwalker Ranch?"
yeah, actually, a lot of our participants are not currently in the basin. They are people that have spent time in the basin, ended up going home, brought back something with them to other family members. Now, it doesn't affect them, but as they returned home, their family members had gotten seriously sick. And some of them actually got sick with a very particular blood disease, which is kind of rare. So there's a significant or a statistically significant amount of people that came back. There was a hitchhiker on them or associated with them. Their family members got sick with a very particular blood disease, not all of them. Some got sick with a particular blood disease, and they've had to live with this. So the answer is absolutely yes. And I think right now, three of the participants that we have in the study are I associated with Hitchhiker.
And Jason follows on with a question: what are your thoughts about these terrifying events that people report? So, kind of a general question now. What are your thoughts on the terrifying events that people report?
I think that a lot of people report, I would say that there's a lot of things that happen. The people that have the courage to, they will actually come up and report these. So you can't discount, as a scientist, I don't discount anybody's interpretation of something that's happened to them. So, I've seen this enough where people have had terrifying experiences. In fact, if you want to scoot down to um, page 22 of that and show the audience that particular page, this is something where, if they could do that, can you see it now? So this is a particular situation where I recorded some data from a device where the individual or the participant said they woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and thought this was the only time that they ever felt that they were been abducted. And this is a very rational person that is a teacher and very well respected, and got scared terribly from this. And I looked at the data, and that's the data that I found that night at exactly the time that person logged that particular anecdotal information into the system, where the gamma spike happened at that exact moment. So, but they had, luckily they were part of a study that they can express that, but there's a lot of other people that had these experiences that don't have the ability to say anything. Well, I think that one of the things that really, well, the medical case that I first studied was the one that really set me looking for an answer. But I was actually on the ground looking, doing some experiments, and I saw a UAP. I would never thought I would ever see anything like that. But I saw it. People standing next to me saw the exact same thing. We took a picture of it. Now, I looked at it, many, many times over. I thought it was a satellite. It was definitely not a satellite. It was too low. It was in an airplane. So that's the one thing that said, there's something going on here, and it's not just in our heads.
Yeah.
Right, and just for those people that didn't hear that, because I think my microphone was off, Nickname was asking what was Jim's most compelling case or experience.
No,
So I've got a question from Umbraman. What corporate or military bodies are still involved with Skinwalker?
So I would imagine that you're talking about, is there any government agency involved in this?
I think
So
that's what it's referring to. Yeah.
one of the things that, because of my involvement in the area and I have a lot of relationships with people of, maybe higher government standings, I get asked to brief a lot of the agencies in the U.S. government. And the thing is that the amount of requests that I get tells me that they're extremely interested in what's going on. So they because of political natures and political landscapes, they can't really say they're looking for little green men. They're not going to come out and say that. It'd be crazy for them to say that. So they rely on people like myself, and there's a lot of other people, I know that they call on. So I would say that everybody's interested, and there's no question about it. They're extremely interested. They have budgets, very, very secretive budgets for They can't, of course, give me any money, or they would never give me any money, or anybody like me any money, but they have money available for their own investigations to get in contact with people like me.
Yes.
Just
I've got
before
a
you go to the next question, because you just, I know it was tongue in cheek, you touched on little green men, but there were people report seeing typical alien type beings.
So mostly crafts, but there are a lot of people that will look for, that will see shapes going. So I had one anecdotal thing that happened not too long ago. Somebody that actually was a hitchhiker. They said that they were sitting there and they saw an entity cross the room. Normally you'd say, and they were just sitting there watching TV, and they felt that there was a presence. They turned around and something went right across the room. So normally you hear that from somebody and say, well, okay, that's interesting. I don't. But then I look at the data that their device had, and sure enough, they had a tremendous amount of electromagnetic energy into their house at an exact moment.
Les, I know you've got a question, but I just want to kind of follow on from that. So the different entities, should we say, or types of phenomena, do they register as different types of energy? Or
yeah, they're never corporal, so they're never physical. They're more like things that people will like, shadows and things like that. It's like it doesn't really materialize in a normal sense.
I guess what I meant, Jim, was, if somebody reported seeing a sphere of light, might not have done,
Right,
pass through their room, would it present on the electronic equipment as a different type of reading to if they'd have seen some shadow of a vague shadow of a being?
Yeah, kind of, I guess. So like for instance, I had one instance where somebody said they saw a craft. They went outside, the dogs were barking, all the neighbors' dogs were barking. They looked up in the sky, and there was a craft. And it flew over, and again, I wouldn't bring that up. I wouldn't even acknowledge it unless I had something reading. So I had, I think like a microwave, something glitched in the microwave.
Right.
But then sometimes you would not even touch the microwave. Or maybe the gravity vector would just like go crazy for just a few seconds, when they have that.
Right.
It
Okay.
depends on, it's different. It's different. Sometimes it's the gammas, sometimes it's the microwave, sometimes it's the gravity vector. It does vary.
Right. Sorry about that. Let's go on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Jim, for that, and Paul. Umbra Man is asking, what? No, I've asked that one. Move on, Les. Justin Apple is asking, did Bob Bigelow sell Skinwalker Ranch, and if so, why did he sell it?
So that's a really good question. So yes, he did sell it in, I believe, 2016, and the reason that he sold it is that, well, there's two reasons. One, he was extremely frustrated because he spent so much time and money trying to investigate this, and it seemed like the phenomena was just playing with him. So he just got so frustrated. But then, in the same light, at that time, his wife was very ill, and he decided that he better spend some time. I don't, there's speculation that it was a lot of hitchhiker stuff that he had problems with. But he did sell it, and one of the reasons was because his wife, who just recently passed away, and this whole idea is that he was just frustrated with this phenomenon.
Does the hitchhiker, as you termed it, and I didn't want to use hitchhiker, to be honest, because that's what I've heard you guys describe it as before, and we've called it the host victim, host victims, because in most instances this type of phenomena or this type of interaction, but the ones I've looked at have been pretty negative, and host victim, because there's not a good outcome for host victims usually. But do they have different experiences from the hitchhiker phenomena, or is it mainly negative?
It's mainly negative. That's the problem. When you're there, it's mostly positive. There are some instances where it's negative, but I haven't really experienced anybody that had a hitchhiker type of situation where they've had good things happen. So that's unfortunate.
It is, yeah.
But it's unfortunate, but it's an interesting data point, though.
And Do you think it's the same phenomena then? That's I know I'm covering same ground, and I'm not trying to trick you with question. Is it a hive mind? Is it the same phenomena that's interacting with people when it go? I know we don't know, do we? It's quite simply.
It's yeah. I would say that it probably is a variant of it or an offshoot of it, because a lot of the things that when things go bad at the places, in the Uinta Basin, you get a lot of this medical injuries.
Yeah.
The stuff that happens in a hitchhiker sense are somewhat similar. So I would have to say, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of rare blood problems or trauma that happens.
Okay. Les, it's us with some more questions. Thank you, Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Great questions in tonight, folks. And yeah, we'll welcome questions if you have any for our guests tonight. Right, Andy Codes is asking, have you had any involvement with Stardust Ranch?
Stardust Ranch, unfortunately, the gentleman that owns Stardust Ranch just passed away.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's very, very unfortunate. We were asked to completely instrument the property and bring all this instrumentation, because I guess Bob Bigelow tried to do some stuff down there many years ago before Skinwalker. So we were asked to do all this stuff, and unfortunately he passed away. So I think they're going to sell the property.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And Nickname is asking, what information is handed over to the ranch owners that you can say, and why?
So when I have a relationship with these people, I make it clear that all the data is theirs. I'm just a viewer of the data, so I turn over everything to like, for instance, the Blind Frog Ranch people. They have their access to everything. So, unlike Bob Bigelow, who was kind of like everything was his. He spent the money for it, so everything was his. So I presented to them and said, look, I want to solve this problem, but I want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. I don't want anybody to feel that they're just a scientific instrument.
Do you think that the actual experiment will have a more positive outcome like that, probably, as well, won't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there could have been some startling bits of information collected in the past.
Yeah, especially the Stardust Ranch people. I think that when Bob Bigelow was there, he gathered all this information, just went away, and he never told them anything about it. And I think there's a book on that.
Right. Okay. Are there any agencies that are actively involved, or have you been told not to disclose any particular aspect?
Well, I know that for the U.S. government is very, very interested. State Department is very, very interested because of their problem with the Havana syndrome, which is closely related to this. A lot of the people that I have, or some of the people that I have in the study, are Havana syndrome type of people.
Do you want to expand on that, or is it?
No, that's fine. So a lot of the injuries, or I don't want to say a lot. Some of the injuries that we have found in the past, we were able to go and do some of the medical MRIs that you needed to verify that they actually had Havana syndrome. There's a particular MRI series called the DTI that you have to do. And we were fortunate enough to be able to have some participants or people that were involved in this that gave us permission to have these things. And sure enough, we found out that the very strange anomaly that happens to the Havana syndrome patients, this axial shearing that happens to these people, also happened to some of the people that have been hurt in the Uinta Basin. So, this is going back to 2016 when they first came up, or it wasn't even a Havana syndrome at that point. It was just a bunch of people that got hurt in Havana. But so a lot of the government requests are from the people that are interested in solving the Havana syndrome problem.
It's crazy, Jim, when you think that, I mean, the UK government, and I can't speak for your side of the world, but when you talk about unexplained phenomena, there's so much suppression, and this is of no interest to us yet. Behind the scenes, there's just massive amounts of interest and money poured into finding out the true origins of it, really, aren't they? Yeah. So on data that you've got so far, because we've gone 19 to early into 22, are you able to predict the mood of this phenomena?
So yeah, so actually, over the past year now, we've gotten to the point where I don't know how familiar you are with the statistics. So I am
I'm
at like,
not. I'm not. So if you just
so
like,
I remember the LHC, they claimed 6 sigma accuracy. I don't know, it was this thing. Anyway, it's a statistical measurement. Anyway, so we're currently around 5 sigma accuracy of predicting something that's going to happen to a participant based upon the previous data that we've got for over the past like 24 to 48 hours. So we will say, okay, we think something's going to happen to this particular person over the next 24 to 48 hours, and within a certain with a certain margin, we're accurate.
and these individuals, is it more physical trauma than actually seeing the crafts? What about and or is it a mixture?
It's more, I think it's both. I mean, well, actually, in the Uinta Basin, it's a lot to do with the stuff that's up in the air. Outside of that, because in the Washington area and in the West Coast, it's not so much. People don't see anything up in the air. Maybe it's because it's just so nice there. I mean, the air is so perfect there. But a lot of the stuff happens with, there's always some UAP that's cruising across the sky that they see.
Do they talk about landed objects?
Landed?
Yeah, on the
Um,
ground.
Never. I've never heard anybody refer to anything that was on the ground. It's all flying over their heads or, coming in fast and then zipping out and things like that.
And what about the cryptid type phenomena? The dog man, the Sasquatch type.
Oh, well, that kind of goes into what people refer to as, these anomal or these figures that they see. Um, and then everybody assigns it. Every time you see something scary, right, you assign a name to it.
Yeah.
We call them lizard people, but it's like this shadow that looks kind of like a lizard that would come, and I don't put much credence to that, but
No.
maybe I should. I don't know. Maybe I
So,
should.
so is it, so I take it that's not somewhere that the research is going to go anytime soon.
I don't think so. I think that I know people do see these mirages or these shapes. Whether or not they're. I wouldn't say that they're skinwalkers or anything like
No,
that.
I'm obviously, I don't want to labor on this, but if your witnesses are not all of them, but some of them are reporting this, then isn't it worth a little bit of study?
If there was a predominance about a people, I mean, I've heard maybe two where they said something, some actual like, I don't know, just some being, looked sinister and like a skinwalker.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's not that. It's most of
Right.
the time, it's like I see this cloud of something that goes by me.
I see. Yeah. So that we no MIB, Men in Black type scenarios or anything
No,
like that.
nothing like
No.
that. Not to say that maybe we're just not looking. I don't know. I just
Okay. And have you, or do you intend in future to cross-reference the area of research that you're looking into with other places of eye strangeness? I suppose I've just answered my own question here, because you'd have to have similar data and analysis devices in other parts of the world, wouldn't you?
Well, we got a few on the West Coast. We got a few over in the Washingtons, in that area, and then a lot of them in the Uinta Basin. We were going to do Stardust Ranch, but that kind of fell through. So we're, trying to find good, reliable. We don't want to put devices everywhere because that wouldn't make
No.
sense. We want to handpick and put them in the right spot.
Without going into specifics, how expensive are these devices?
So they're expensive enough to
Expensive. That's an
be
answer.
very careful on who gets them.
Yeah. Okay. So where do you want to go with it now, Jim? Any particular area that you want to move into within this discussion?
Well, I think that the basin, the Uinta Basin, is still a very, very good laboratory.
Yeah.
And increasing the density of devices in there is going to give us a lot more information. And getting some really good participants are going to really what we need to do.
Have you received any help from other scientific minded people outside of the experiment?
So I confer with a lot of people on this. There's other people that I've been, on different media with that have a lot of scientific background that I talk to a lot.
Okay. So what about historic cases? Are there any historic cases that you could talk about?
As far as before the study,
Yeah, before you became involved in it.
well, there's a lot of interesting things that happened on Skinwalker. That's mostly what I know in the area. Before I really got involved in it, really didn't even know it existed. It's kind of interesting. But there's been a lot of lore about dire wolves and those kind of things. But I think what happens is a lot of times people, when they have an experience and they don't have any other place to go, their brain takes over and they kind of assign things to it and helps them, gives name to things, and make their brain kind of makes things up for them so they can like sleep at night.
Well,
So,
yeah, but in some instances, Jim, they can't sleep at night after the brains have made
yeah,
these things up.
absolutely.
We've got some witnesses. The bulk of the witnesses in Wolflands, hence the name, who claim to have seen something that we could only describe as a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they've not talked about gnashing teeth and something attacking them. Sometimes these things have just been watching them, but multiple witness accounts. And I'm not I'm not a scientist, but I'm not sure that when they've claimed to have one set of witnesses in particular claimed that this thing were watching them all night. How would your brain make that up unless they're just plain not telling us truth?
Well, but it could be something is watching them. It might not be that particular
Okay.
station. So I believe that a lot of these people are in this energy field, right? They're getting bombarded by something, right? Obviously, because I'm reading something. You saw the gamma spike that I got. So there's obviously something going on, some energy that's on them. How your brain interprets that is very interesting. I just give you an experience. So during my postdoc, I worked in the radiation oncology area in one of the hospitals, and we used to deal with a lot of the gamma ray patients, people that went into have lesions taken out of their brain, and they would go through these treatments, and they would come out and say, you guys were. I'm in here having this treatment, and you're having a party. I smell pizza, and what are you guys having all these people in here and having a party? Of course we weren't, but during this procedure where they're getting gamma rays pumped into their brains interpreting that, and they're rationalizing it, and they made that up for them or whatever, whatever.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be confrontational with my thoughts on this, but that's during a medical procedure. I'm talking about people who've just gone for a weekend fishing in a forest,
Yeah.
and claimed they've seen this. And then we've got another witness who's I know I'm pro the witnesses who we've spoken to, but me personally, I think I haven't got an explanation for it, Jim. I really haven't, and you could be on the money with what you're saying. You're the
Maybe
scientist, I'm not.
by
But,
some type of radiation field or some type of electromagnetic field, and their brain fired up. And
so, do you think that's the reason they're seeing you saw the UFO then?
I don't know.
Because or do you believe that you actually saw it? That's what I'm
Well,
getting at.
pictures of it. A lot of people take pictures of those things.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
key,
So,
right?
yeah. So,
Right. So sometimes it's not made up. So sometimes it's actual stuff that they're taking pictures of, and that's
yeah.
why it's important.
So, uh, do you have any devices set up for taking images, cameras, footage?
Yes. So the bigger device. So if you go back to that slide 11, the bigger device actually sits outside, and it's got some interesting cameras in there that has infrared. It's got visual, and it actually just scans the sky all night long and looks for
Really?
anything that goes by. And the intent of that is to again correlate all the radio frequency stuff, the electromagnetic stuff, anything that's happening with things that fly over the sky. And the one device is the one that is you know getting a lot of readings over in near the Blind Frog area. So that's getting a lot of interesting data where I'm actually seeing things in the sky. People are interacting and saying, look, we're having experiences. And at the same time, we're having, these electromagnetic energy anomalies happen at the same time. So
do you have frame captures of the images, Jim?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
Are you looking at similar things all the time, or different type of light phenomena or craft?
well, it's mostly light. Yeah, we can't. And actually, it's light with a lot. So we're getting the heat spectrum. The heat spectrum is the interesting one, right?
Oh,
So
right.
looking for the heat spectrum around these individual objects. If we could figure out what the heat spectrum is telling us, then we'll know if this craft is something that is fired by some kind of a propellant like we would do that, or it's something that is a little bit more advanced or a lot more advanced, like something that can manipulate space time in order to do locomotion. So, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. Not tremendous amount of data. We only have one of those devices that are in that
Right.
area.
Okay.
It's getting to be very interesting.
And to stay with this device, then, when you see the light, does it appear in one or two frames, or is it passing through?
Well, it's interesting. So it passes through and changes direction. Yeah. So you say, well, if it just passed through, it could be a satellite, it could be a drone or something, it could be, but these things change direction, so it seems like they're looking for something, but it's not of the signature of a drone or a satellite or something like that.
Okay. And this is in color, is it?
Well, the infrared is in black and white, but
Yeah. Right. Okay.
yeah, optical's in color. Yeah.
So is there a set color, or are we looking at white light, yellow, amber?
Well, if you look at the spectrum, unfortunately, the cameras are not really, they're surveillance cameras, so they're not
Yeah. Yeah.
super, I mean, I could get an idea, but it's very narrow spectrum. So when you try to understand, all you get is red, green, and blue, right? So you
Yeah.
really can't get a tremendous amount. So the next step is to put like a spectrometer or something like that, so we
Yeah.
can actually understand exactly what the spectrum is coming off the thing. That's next.
Okay. Thank you. Because we take our half decent cameras up into we'll call it the research area up here, and my problem, or I suppose most of people's problem, is, I mean, my camcorder's a few £1,000s. You'd need something a lot more expensive to be able to film in the darkness. So, and we also bought little Psionics. I don't know if you've heard of these cameras, and it can see in dark, but the lights that we're observing over the sea are amber. They look white on this camera, not because it's in night shot. But it distorts the color, so you're not getting a true reading of the color. Do you think there's something structured behind? And it's speculating, I know.
Yeah,
Behind the light.
one of the problems with the infrared spectrum, the wavelength is so big that the pixels are gigantic. So what might be just a little speck could be blows up to be 4 or 5. So
Yes.
it's a little bit distorting, as far as what it does, what the information that you do get from it. But I think that what's the important thing is that if you can film something and you can and you can convince yourself that it's something that is anomalous, then you can evolve your equipment to get better and better. So I'm going through a situation now. We're saying, look, what we really need to do is we need to put a telescope on there with an actual spectrometer attached to it, so we can actually follow this thing and get its exact spectrum, and we don't have to worry about pixelization of a camera or anything like that. We have better equipment, but you have to go through the steps in order to know what's the next step.
Excellent. And what about thermal cameras? Have you tried thermal cameras?
We have a thermal camera that goes and looks at the spectrum, but again, you're limited to the pixelization of the camera. But now they have really good spectrometers in the thermal range that can really tell you what the exact temperature around that object and in an area of the object, so you can actually thermally plot this thing, and that's what we're looking to do.
It's brilliant. We could do with somebody like you where we are, because that's what it needs. That's definitely what it needs.
I mean, this is not a poor man's game, so it's a game that requires the better and better your equipment is, the more and more expensive it is, of course.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. Well, because of the time and the profile that you've put into Blind Frog and the other places, has it attracted people outside of your experiment to the areas?
You mean as far as disciplines, other disciplines?
The other people are interested in the unexplained phenomena. It must have done.
Yeah. So,
How does it affect?
enough, medical professionals are
Right.
very, very interested in this. I have somebody that's a forensic neurologist that I work with a lot. You would never expect that kind of person to be interested in this kind of thing, but after you've seen a case that you can't explain, you see another case you can't explain, then you get the bug, right? You say, "Wow, I really need to look at these things." So you start gathering a lot of data. So medical professionals I see that are entering the field because, like I said, we're the best receptors of this. We're the best scientific instruments. So
Yeah.
you need a medical professional to actually look at those type of things. A lot of the statisticians are somebody that really likes this kind of stuff because you don't get one data point. You have millions of data points, and you have to sit through all the noise to try to understand what you have, and that's perfect for a statistician.
Does well, it excites you? I can tell you.
Yeah.
Looking at the data, it gives you a buzz, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I like looking at the data and sifting through it. I'm not a really good statistician. I mean, there's people a lot better than I am, but I have the tools of the trade.
What then, Jim, is a eureka moment when you're looking at a recent one?
When I see a correlation between what people experience and changes in the environment that my equipment or the equipment that they have around them read. Once I see that, I know they're not making it up. I mean, they can't possibly make this stuff happen.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, you'd have to be a NASA physicist in order to be able to create gamma rays in your house.
Yeah, I would think I'm gonna go to some questions in a moment because I've kind of exhausted my mind asking you questions, to be honest with you. And so if Les has got some questions, he'll be helping me out.
Yeah, sure. And we're kind of picking up from the Bigelow era. And Adam Sander is asking, Jim, why did Bigelow keep much of his research results to himself?
A lot of speculation about that. A lot of people say that, well, first of all, he didn't keep it all to himself. He released a lot of the day-to-day um, data that the scientists took. They would do every day. They would go through and they would do a survey of the land. They would do electromagnetic survey, gravity survey. So all that data become available. It's the situations that happened that were recorded, faxed to Bob Bigelow's, literally faxed to his bedroom fax machine. That's the only place it ever existed. Those reports went away. He held those close. Now, it's speculated that something happened of significance or something didn't happen of significance. Who knows? But he never made any of that public. In fact, the person that bought it asked for this stuff, and Bob just refused. So who knows? That's it. If he did find something, it's a shame that he buried it, but it was his. He paid for it.
Yeah, but do you think there's a reason? Because I mean, I couldn't speak for the guy. I've had no contact ever. But do you think there's a reason for coveting the information, meaning it's gone somewhere else, or would that be just pure speculation?
He was a guy that he was a deep believer, somebody that really, really believed in all of this. And I think myself, my personal feeling is that he found something. And he didn't want anybody to know what he found. I think that's what it was.
Right. Okay. Go on, let's.
Yeah, and Al is asking, how accessible is the basin to the public?
Oh, very big. Oh, very well. The ranches are not, obviously. In fact, Skinwalker Ranch, I don't think you can get even close to that place. Um, but the basin is wide open. You can go up into the canyon. You can do anything you want. It's very accessible. In fact, there's a lot of conferences there. There's a conference at the end of May that they've asked me to come speak at. That I'm going to be up there. So I'll be talking to some of the people that are in the study and things like that.
What is the conference, Jim? What's the name of it? Do you know off the
Well,
top of your...
I don't know the exact name, but they're revealing some very interesting. In fact, I might have sent you a link of the other day. I forgot the name of it, but they have some very startling video that they've recorded,
Yeah.
U.S. government reported that they're going to unveil to the public, and they've asked myself and another scientist to give their opinion, along with a lot of other people that are interested in to give their opinion of what that particular video is. It's supposed to be pretty dramatic. So it's the end of May in Utah, or in anyway.
Just before Les goes to another question, what do you think to the extraterrestrial kind of hypothesis that that's what these things are? Because to me, the phenomenon is already there. It's not coming or flying.
Yeah, I just have a hard time thinking nature made this stuff, and I think that it just begs somebody a whole lot smarter and more advanced than us has this stuff. Now, a lot of people say, well, if you talk to the government, it's always some other country, some sinister countries doing this to us. But I mean, some of this stuff is so far advanced that I can't even imagine that we didn't. And I'm in the scientific community. I read a lot of papers, so it would have snuck out somewhere, this advanced technology, but I haven't seen anything closely related to this. That some of the stuff is just not explainable with what I would perceive to be in next 100 years.
Plus the fact, I mean, I know we couldn't elaborate or touch on much of the historic stuff, but a lot of this stuff goes back hundreds of years as well, doesn't it? Long before we had half an ounce of notion how to create planes, even perhaps.
Yeah, if you go back to recorded history, people that have give interpretations of this, and you kind of weed out their generation's slangs and stuff like that, it all reads the same. They saw this entity, it flew across the sky. They got a headache, or they felt euphoric, or something happened. Maybe 200 years ago, it sounded a little bit differently than it does today, but it sounds all the same. The petroglyphs and things like that you find up in the thing, they all have the same look and feel of what we would interpret today as looking up in the sky and seeing something cruise across.
Yeah. So just to touch on it, I mean, you very early on when we first started speaking, you talked about the crickets going silent, and I call this the lower silence, when they seem actually they're disjointed from reality. Have you done any studies on that? I personally think that's a key to where a lot of this lies. This first initial feeling. I mean, you said for some people it's euphoric; they love it, and but it's key to the phenomena, be it UFO related, cryptid related, all aspects of the phenomena report this strange descent into this disjointed, this reality, the lower silence, where everything just seems to become in a vacuum. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, I mean that's majority of what we looked into. So it looks like most of the interactions people have, that is so it just enters them in such a way that it kind of overtakes them. So
Yeah.
they lose the other senses, and they're just so focused. Most of these people even go catatonic. They just lose time.
Yeah.
But most of the time, what you'll have is that they'll be in a situation, they'll just forget about everything else. They get so concentrated on this one thing. So what's ever happening, it's really making your brain focus on that particular thing. Now, that's maybe the intent of it, or who knows.
Do you think it's making them focus, Jim, or it's just absolutely disengaged them from reality? Do you think that it's making them focus, or is the focus because something else is happening?
I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. I think that your brain is trying to understand whatever it is that's going on, and you know that. I mean, when you're watching a movie, right, and something's happening that's real intense, you can everything shuts off, right? Or you're reading a book and then you're like on a really good section, everything shuts off. I mean, maybe that's just the very your way your brain works.
But it's almost as though they don't actually realize it's happened until it's over.
Right. That's exactly right. Right.
Yeah. In the intense thing, the experiences that I had as a child, which has put me on this path, I was always going to be ready for it. I was always going to be ready, always. But I never was, and it weren't until it had happened that I realised it had happened. It doesn't even sound like I'm making sense there, but I can't think of the words. I haven't got the vocabulary to describe that feeling, really.
So I had a situation where one of our participants was hiking with a partner, and the partner was filming them doing something in the river or something like that. While they were filming, something flew over their head and stopped. Now, when they were asked about it, they had no, and it was something that obviously the person should have seen. So when asked about it, the person had no idea it happened and really didn't understand what was happening around them for a period of time. So whatever this thing was, I think made that person so focused on that particular instance that they didn't know what was going on. So until later on, when they saw the video, says, "Wait a minute, that was me." It was very strange. So yeah, whatever's going on, it's happening in making it takes over. I'm not going to say it takes over your brain. I think your brain actually is so interested or so focused on it that it shuts off all your senses, and that with maybe the crickets go away. And I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
And actually, I've experienced something like that. We were in an area, and all of a sudden, all the natural noises just went away for a few seconds, and you felt weird, like somebody was watching, and then it all came back. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of a thing that you don't know.
I like the analogies that these once again independent witnesses put on it, and we've got one, and he said it was like somebody had pressed pause on the world. Said it just suddenly became aware that the sound of the sea had stopped, couldn't hear the seagulls, and then the experience took over. And I don't know whether we're suddenly enveloped into that environment, or whether I don't know what's happening. Are we in an altered environment, or is the phenomena impressing itself onto us and maybe catching us in that focus to do something else?
There's been situations where we've had people that claim to have been given instructions. So they would get into this state where they would just be told something. It was very strange. They would say, like, I want you to go do this. I want you to go to this particular place or go to this particular place or do this particular thing. And it's almost like they were being tested, whether or not that's something that your brain just interpreted that way. But it felt like they were being instructed, not because they wanted them to actually do it, but to see if they would do it.
So when you say, I know it's difficult, isn't it? So when you say that, I take it that that's what they felt, and they didn't audibly hear something within their head saying no.
Typically, they're not alone. Like I said, this video, the person didn't see it directly, but looked at the video and saw it. They were just filming this particular person, and something flew over to them. It was on the video, but the person never really realized it. It flew right in front of them. Nobody realized it, but that person had no clue what was going
on. Have you got any plans to take such as spiritual mediums or anybody like that to these affected areas to see what
results might be? A lot of people that are very, very perceptive to this thing. It seems that they can go into an area and they can say, yeah, this is a bad area or this is a good area. And so this person that I partner with knows a lot of these people and are very, very intuitive. So, I'm very jealous for me. I'm very jealous about this. I don't have that ability, but these people seem to have the ability to go into an area and be able to very definitively say, what this whole thing is and talk about it.
And there are good areas and bad areas, or does it vary?
Well, I think there's lots of areas, but really it's depending on the people that go into the area.
Right. Yeah.
Things like that. So
if you're going with bad intent or the wrong mindset, you're more likely to have a negative. I know we've done this earlier, a negative experience.
But though you have to go to I think you have to go to a specific area. So there seems to be very concentrated hotspots where when these type of people get into there, that's when they have the experiences.
Okay. And how often have you visited them, Jim, these particular areas?
So I maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. Like I said, I'm going in May. I was just there maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago. But a lot of things I do is all remote. So,
Will you sleep there?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hotel. And yeah, sure. Yeah. Like I said, I have never had a hitchhiker experience, or I've never had an actual experience, but maybe I have. I just never knew it.
Well, who can say? we'll see if there's any questions. Riveting stuff, Jim. I mean, what to say? It's deep.
Right, at this point, guys, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. And Paul Sinclair, you have a website which is on the screen for the viewers on this broadcast. And tell us what's on the website, Paul, and if you have any books to buy, and if you have a reporting system on there.
Yeah, there's UFO, cryptid, big cat reports on the website, and they're all first-hand accounts. That's all we're kind of dealing with, and they'll not have been anywhere else in the world. I mean, people are welcome to take them from the website. Just give us a little bit of credit. So the website's truthproof.uk. The books are no longer for sale on Amazon, as I've said before. The paperbacks, they're for sale on the website, and but you can also obtain the Kindles via Amazon. And yeah, that's basically where we're at. Everybody knows the live stream, and anything that Jim wants to promote regarding the research or anything you're doing, Jim, please just.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, and anything you want to talk about yourself, please just tell us now. I mean, obviously we've covered the subject, but I know that in future you do plan to do the book.
Yes, that book is going to be pretty amazing. Again, the people are telling their own stories, and I'm backing it up with scientific data. So it's going to be the first time it's going to come out.
Yeah,
they actually can see this.
Well, I've not really heard. I mean, you'll be able to correct me, but I've not really heard of people within the subject of unexplained phenomena. We've not done this. I've collected first-hand accounts, but there's a difference here, because you're collecting the accounts and the experiences and documenting the physical effects and the effects via this equipment. So it's a one step further, and I don't think there'll be a book like that out there anywhere, will they?
No, I'm going to show waveforms, and this happened here and this happened here. It's like, how can you rationalize that as being, how can you just say, well, you made it up? Well, you didn't make it up.
No, it literally does take it a step further than what, definitely than what I'm doing. I mean, I've got faith in the witness, and because we do sift them out, I mean, we get lots and lots of reports, and I'm always polite to everybody, but if there's something that just doesn't seem quite right, I never follow it up, not in any great detail, but when you've got people coming to you and they sound sincere, I know that's all we've got to go on, but you've just gone the extra mile with this scientific data, but I can't do that. I mean, anybody out there, anybody listening in UK wants to help, because we did, like I said, I did have the offer of help from America. Yeah. Brilliant guy, but it was just, in the end, it just expanded from random number generators to about 6 pieces of equipment. And you're sat there in front of me now, Jim, and what would that have involved for me collecting that data and getting that data to this guy?
That's a lot.
I wouldn't have been able to do anything else, I don't think, would I?
No, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of legwork. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you want to point out that we don't have a lot of it, but we now have data where we have personal experiences, we have sensor readings correlated, and now we have video of things passing along in the sky. So we have 3, plus we have dogs barking. Dogs seem to be extremely sensitive.
Animals, we'll touch on animals in a moment, but yeah, Les might want to ask us something else.
Yes, we've got some great questions tonight, and I apologise now because I'm conscious of the time. If I don't get any questions in, then probably some of the questions that you've asked might have been answered earlier on in the show, but I'm going to plough through some more. So, Nickname is asking, and I think you've already touched on this, Jim, should researchers be looking around the ranch, or is the phenomena concentrated more at Skinwalker?
So if you look at a map of the area, the concentration, as far as I know, the concentration of the strange phenomena is more up in the canyon area. And that seems to be a lot where old civilizations have spent a lot of time in. So it does filter down. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that Skinwalker is kind of at the bottom of the thing, but Blind Frog happens to be right in the middle of the damn thing. So it's like, that's where the really strange things happen. But mostly it's up in the canyon area. and that's where all of the precious metals are, and that's where all of the where a lot of the stuff was buried and things like that. So
Touched on this as
he's a
well.
business.
I think you've touched on this as well, Jim.
So he's a businessman. So I think that probably he was interested in I think that when I worked for that area, it was like, can we reverse engineer this stuff so we can use it ourselves? And that was always the theme. I mean, the guy's smart, right? He's a businessman, he's smart, he's a billionaire. And I'm sure in the back of his mind says, look, if I can figure out how they propel themselves, I'm going to use it. So
Yeah.
does he want the humanitarian thing? Probably thought that way too. But I would bet that he was saying, look, if I can figure out how to do a warp drive, I'm going to make a warp drive and I'm going to put it on my things.
Yeah, yes, that's probably the way I was thinking.
Just
Jim.
before you move on, Les, just before you move on, and ancient civilizations, ancient habitation in the canyon, is there any evidence that these ancient civilizations practiced any type of ritualistic magic or anything like that?
Yeah, a lot of monuments, a lot of petroglyphs. We found monuments all over the place. I work with somebody that's in the area that has found caves where there seems to be, things that are like hundreds and hundreds of years old that represent a tribute to something or a monument to something. Of course, over the years it's worn down, but things in caves have survived. So it looks like I said, it seems like an area where you would go. You felt either protected or you felt, you felt as though that's the area that I want to live because something's protecting me.
So if you went into those caves and got images, would that be seen as violating and taking something back with you?
It might. I never actually went into a cave with an experiment and actually recorded where up in the canyon. Never did that. And, that's
Is it something that you might do?
Absolutely, yeah. I think when I'm there in May, that's going to be a trip that I'm going to take and do something like that.
And brave is probably the word. Would you be brave enough to take images of what's left of these? Yeah.
The problem is that again, you can't interact with it.
But you are doing then, Jim.
Well, no. So I would have to leave something there for a very long period of time and record over long. So how do you do that? It's a remote area. There's no electricity. There's no Wi-Fi. It's like nothing. So.
I guess I'm simplifying it here. Would you take a digital camera and take images?
Absolutely.
Would you then think that you're taking something back with you from?
I would have to do that, and I would have to get the advice of people that know those things very well. That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I would not go up there without somebody that was really good at this.
Yeah. And when you say good at this, you mean familiar with the area and familiar with the mood of the phenomena?
Familiar with being up there, dealing with the phenomena, coming back with a positive trip, as opposed to coming back and having problems.
Being negative, yeah. Okay, Les.
Yes, thanks for that. And we have let's have a look if I can find my place. Great questions in the chat tonight, guys. Thanks for everybody tuning into this live stream this week. And we have a question from Umbraman. Are the energy signatures similar to those of other areas of high strangeness? I know we've touched on this earlier on in the program, Jim. And Umbraman is following up with, and if not, how do these energy signatures differ?
Well, again, so it depends on what the interaction these people are having. It depends on, because we have so many channels that we're recording, and not to say that we might have missed some on other channels, but the interaction that these people have all manifest themselves differently. Sometimes you would get like the gravitational vector would all of a sudden start shaking. Or you'd have a high microwave cadence in the fluence of the particles or the gamma particles. It all changes depending on what the interaction is. But if you look at them, they all seem to have very similar look and feel as far as one area to another area. So, the question we had before is that's the same phenomena. And I would say that from all I can say is that I'm dealing with the same thing. It just has a different.
head.
Um, I think that I would say to have two strange phenomena in one area is probably, I think one would be good. To have multiples, I don't know. But I'd say there probably are linked. Different people interpret things in different ways.
So the Utah mound builders and enlighten me. Are these burial mounds or?
I think that's what they're referring to.
Yeah. But it's interesting, like I touched on earlier, that a lot of the strange phenomena around here is not centered on, but around the areas of burial mounds and earthworks. Where people have habited. I don't know, thousands of years ago. So it's interesting in itself.
So if I was a highfalutin person and like a king or something like that, and I want to get buried and live, and always be in eternity, I would want to get buried in a place where I felt that there was some energy that was very positive, that like that.
Yeah.
They didn't have pyramids here, so put me in the ground, or give me a monument where the energy is really good.
Yeah, there's special sacred ground. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Les.
Yeah, okay. I don't know about this report, what Blue Shift is asking, but Blue Shift is asking the Scussler report, Scussler, Scussler, reports on the negative effects of getting too close to the phenomena. It's not exactly a question, Blue Shift, but do you know anything about that, Jim?
Can you repeat that?
Scussler.
Getting too close to the phenomena?
Scussler, Scussler, the Scussler reports. Do you not know anything
there's
about
a
that, Jim?
paper on this Blue Shift, and if Jim wants to put an email address forward, you might want to fire it across at him. It might be somewhat of interest.
Yeah, so that'd be great. Yeah, if you have a report that somebody has done that I haven't seen yet, that'd be great. I would love to read it. Yeah, if you can drop it in the chat or.
Yeah, brilliant.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Michael Adams. Okay, I think you've touched on this earlier as well, Jim. When did Mr. Segala first get involved with Skinwalker Ranch, or has he always been involved?
So it was 2011 when I first started to look at the data about the ranch, and then I physically got involved with the ranch in 2016 when I went to investigate the first medical case that was significant enough to merit scientists going out and looking at it.
Right, thanks for that. We've got another question from Richard on Solent. Has the Men in Black phenomena ever occurred at Skinwalker? Also, can Men in Black visit any non-UFO strangeness?
Well, I think
I don't understand that. Yeah, I think you've covered that earlier.
Covered it, and I think the answer was no, weren't it, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
no Men in Black.
No.
Okay,
scientific data, that's what Jim's all about, really, isn't it?
That's scientific, yeah. Nickname is asking, what is the conclusion on the ranch, and what is needed to help the efforts?
The conclusion so far is that we have collected an amazing amount of data. We realize that the equipment that we're using is still not capable of definitively finding the right answer we're looking for, and we need to evolve what we have. But we have so much backlog that now we're much smarter going to the next level. Of course, this is 3 years old, 4 years old. So, we've gone through two different variations of of the equipment, and now we're going to the next one, which is going to be a lot more advanced.
Have you projected a time period how long this experiment's going to last, or is it at the moment you're just rolling?
Well, I think it's gaining momentum. You know, we were saying, you know, I've got lots of data. I can publish a paper and be done with it, but you know, it's like got so much data, and people, more and more people want to get involved, and it's like every time you turn around, you say, wait a minute, I didn't see that before. You know, you get these new things. You say, wait a minute, is that something that I haven't seen before? And you know how it is, right?
So what kind of scientific minds would you be looking for now then, if you needed a different input?
So I like the whole idea of the medical side. I want some really good medical people because again, you know, it's the individuals that interact with the property are the ones that are being affected. So it's obvious that they're the ones that are going to be the best source of data. All I can do, I mean, really, if I just gave you a piece of instrument and you never told me anything, it would be useless, right? I would never be able to do anything. Though it's the people that are the most important part of this. So
Yeah.
getting some medical doctors involved in this would be that's where we need to go.
Are you close to bringing anybody on board with that, or is it something that you just?
So, yeah, we have a medical doctor that's already a neurologist, but we need someone that is probably better in the virology and something like that to really look at to analyze the blood and you know do all those kind of things where we know things are happening.
Okay. Are we more questions, Les? Because we've
got some more. No, we've got Gary Jones is asking. I'll kind of paraphrase this. Let's have a look. Well, I'll read it out verbatim. Does anyone know the frequency the military are aware of in advance of UFOs showing up?
Well,
they have foreknowledge of them arriving. When and where?
So when we do get these kind of things happening, the entire spectrum seems to jump up from like 800 megahertz up into 4 or 5 gigahertz. So it's never really one particular frequency. It seems to be spread out over a large range of frequencies where the entire spectrum would be affected, which takes an enormous amount of energy. I mean, the amount of energy you would need to affect the entire spectrum is amazing. So, you know, that's a really good question. So it's never one, you know, it's like in the movies, you see, you know, this spike at, you know, 947 megahertz, but it never happens that way. It's always the entire spectrum would start jiggling.
So I guess what we're saying, Gary, is that if the military knew it, it'd probably be over and finished with, or that's what I'm thinking, before they could do anything about it. It's not something that had slowly build up. Is it just an instant?
Yeah.
If not to 60 kind of thing.
Yeah. One of the things we learned with the equipment that we're designing is that it has to be super fast.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things happen in the millisecond to 5 millisecond range, and then it's done. It's over. So whatever happens, so like when the person gets affected, that whole thing is up and done in a few milliseconds.
Yeah. So based on what you're discovering, then Jim, they couldn't be there in advance of it happening, based on these things slowly escalating.
Yeah. So whatever happened, it came and went.
Yeah.
The problem with observations, right? If you don't know where it's going to be and it only lasts a few seconds, less than a second, what are you going to do? You have to look everywhere.
Hence the reason that you're saying you want as many of these devices as you can. Yeah.
And all we're catching is the fringes of it. We're not deep in the middle of it. We're catching the fringes of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. And I've got a question from a nickname. Has Jim any comparable data points outside the Skinwalker Ranch on this phenomena?
Yeah, most of the data that I have is not on Skinwalker Ranch. Like I said, most of the data that I have is up in the canyon area. I don't have any data, in fact, down there. The closest I have is maybe about 4 miles away from there. So they're very secretive. They don't let anything on there.
No,
they're into their, you know, whatever, you know, they're into their experiments. But you know, but we have some really good data up in the area where I think is the most active.
Do you think you're obviously happy doing what you're doing, but would it not be good to cross-reference if you were approached?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of ranches that came to our that had come out of the woodwork and said, we have phenomena, come instrument our property. Or somebody that there's other people that have some instruments, not a lot of instruments, but they have some instruments that have collected data, and they want to collaborate. So that's one of the things I'll be doing in May is talking
Yeah,
to them.
that can only be good, can't it? The
No,
result,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you think then that the different ranches, because there's miles between them, have you noticed that any of the different ranches are reporting different types of phenomena, and we'll say one aspect of the phenomena specific to that area, or is it just a myriad of?
Well, it's always this, kind of the same. So they would have a lot of things flying over their heads. There are always, so whatever UAPs they're filming, but they all have these sensations. And when they go out into the properties and they have these, they start losing time, or they start, that whole thing starts
Yep.
closing in on them, and
Yep.
they
The
will
lower
be
silence.
all of a sudden they realize that they've been standing here for 20 minutes. They have no idea what happened, but they get this feeling that they've been giving some instructions or things like that. So
Right.
these are a lot of things that happen that and then they'll say, well, can I get some instruments? So we look at their cases and kind of invest
See
in
whether
now.
the maths add up to fund it
Yep.
as well, I suppose.
Yep.
Okay, Les.
Right, Nickname is asking, is any of the... All right, I'll start again. Is any of it comparable to Chris Bledsoe, Bledsoe, Chris Bledsoe experiences? Do you know anything about
No, I
that,
don't.
Jim?
Is that another thing
Right,
that
okay.
I haven't, I need to be made aware of, I think. Is
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's...
just put a bit of information in the chat, or I don't know, fire an email at me and I'll make sure it gets to Jim, or vice versa.
Yeah.
We need to put an email out, and yeah.
There's so many good, rich data out there.
Well, it sounds like there's a paper in one of the earlier questions that's
that'd be great.
News.
V. McCrinnan, I hope I've pronounced your name correct, yeah? Right then. Does Jim see any correlation between the incidences of gamma bursts with detected upper ionosphere sprites or ionospheric experiments run at HAARP type facilities? HAARP, HAARP.
Well, to be honest with you, that's actually a really good question. So we have a GPS device in there. We don't have GPS device in there because it's a cool thing to have. We want to know where the location is. We have a GPS device in there because it connects to satellites, and it's very, very sensitive. There's a very small antenna inside of it, and what we find out is that a lot of the gamma that comes in also affects the number of satellites the GPS sensor is getting. And it always turns out that every time we get these big hits of gamma, like I showed you in the picture, we drop satellites. So that means that whatever it is happening in the it's happening way up in the atmosphere. So that's maybe something's being ionized up there as well. So it kind of tells you that whatever happening is coming down from up top and affecting the way that the GPS signals are being received from the satellites. So I think it's yes. I think there is a correlation between what's happening on the ground and what's happening up there as well.
Have you ever put any equipment in a balloon and let it?
We did that. Yeah, I did that. In fact, on a rocket too. It was
really?
in the show, by the way. We did do that, and the problem is that when you do that, it's one point in time. If the phenomena is
Now, I guess I didn't mean that, Jim. I meant a tethered balloon.
we just let it sit there.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, unfortunately not. So we sent a balloon up. It was just one data point. We sent it up and just had it, didn't tether it, and unfortunately that didn't give much information.
Do you think that might be something that'd be worth trying?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I had done is I know somebody that puts experiments up on the space station, one of the scientists that works with me, he's an engineer that works and designs experiments. And what we wanted to do was actually put something up on the space station and have it running 24/7. Now, of course, all the noise goes away, everything goes away, and we can read it. Now, they don't have instruments that are reading the kind of things we are. So we wanted to put something there. There's also some small satellites that are getting launched that we wanted to actually put some instrumentation in to get up into the, of course, that's pretty high, right? It's up in asynchronous orbit. So that is a definite possibility, because if it's coming down from above, that's where you're going to start seeing the best signals and the lowest noise.
Okay, it's fabulous. We're just about
Yeah, that's really interesting, is that, Jim? And I'll move on with another question. Patricia Adams Wright is asking,
Hi, Pat.
has Jim any idea of what the First Nation Indigenous people are saying about what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch lately?
Well, maybe not just Skinwalker, maybe about the basin as a whole, perhaps.
Oh, so a lot of the indigenous people to the area view the whole area as very, very sacred and they're very religious about it. So they get upset when anybody comes in and upsets, because and the reason, it's a really good reason, right? Because every time somebody comes in and upsets it, it seems that it upsets a large region and a lot of people get affected. These people are very, very sensitive. So if they come and you do something and you create something, you don't treat it with respect, not just that person gets affected, a lot of people get affected. So they don't like that whole thing. And some of the participants that I have are native to the area, and they're very, very careful about what they do. They're very careful how they present things and what they do with. So
out of respect for these people, I suppose you've actually got to be careful how you talk about it as well.
Yeah, you have to be very careful how you present it and things like that, because it's not, they don't get offended by it. Of course, they know that they're very spiritual and they know they're connected to the land. And it's not just the native people. A lot of the people that have been there for a long time, they actually get the same type of thing. They get connected to the land. It's not just the native the people. So they get, like, there's certain things that happen for media, I should say. I don't know how to say that in a nice way. That happen for media that they get very offensive about, because they know that whatever you do, even though it's a big dramatic thing and makes it good for TV,
disingenuous to
messes up their whole
thing.
And then they have to go and they actually have to have ceremonies. They had
to cleanse the land again. Is that almost?
Have, this thing called, it's a ceremony. I forgot the name. I shouldn't. It's a ceremony that they do every year. They had to do it twice last year because things were so messed up.
Right.
I have one final question, guys. Sam has caught up with us tonight. It's been a fascinating show with Jim tonight, and I know people in the chat have enjoyed you, Jim. And I guess the question is, let's have a look. It's from Andy Codes, and I'm sorry if I didn't read your questions out tonight, guys, but as you can see, we are at the end of the show. But Andy is asking, if Jim was offered Skinwalker Ranch to live at, would he move in there?
No. No, thanks.
Simple answer, no.
Yeah, I think that visiting every once in a while is a good thing. But coming home and staying away, I don't want to, I don't want to risk anything happening or me bringing anything back.
Okay.
On that note, yeah, thank you very much, Jim. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for giving us 2 hours of your time. Really good. And, well, I haven't had to say much. You've just informed us. Thank you.
You betcha.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Jim. So I'll just wrap up the show with the viewers tonight. Yeah, there we go. Jim Segala has been with us tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. And look forward to next week. I know we've got a good guest on next week. I ain't going to say who at this moment in time. But if it's anybody like as good as Jim, it's going to be a cracking show. So thanks for all the support. Thanks for everybody in the live stream. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you all next time.